All right, what's going on, boys and girls? So this particular video, as you can tell by the title up above, which Linux distro should you use for gaming? This is my reaction to a Chris Titus Tech video. Now, normally I usually get a pretty much an aneurysm or an ulcer going anytime I watch Homeboy's videos, but I saw this chain of videos that I'm going to be reacting to. So I figured I'd start at the source and kind of give my take, then go to the next two that in that feed of videos. This is old school YouTube. This is a rebuttal videos or response videos to a response video to a response video. So not a lot of people do these anymore. So I found it interesting, and it reminds me of the old days of YouTube. So of course I'm gonna interact with that because I'm showing my age now.
Let's go over gaming distros today because there's one thing I think when you first get into Linux, you're constantly bouncing around to different distributions. And I got curious on a live stream and said, hey, what is the best Linux gaming distribution out of the box? And it's a good starting point because I always say distributions don't matter, they're just a starting point. But if you're a gamer coming to Linux, what does that look like, and where would be the best start? So let's discuss. This video is brought to you by UpCloud, the world's fastest cloud servers for the most business critical customers. Their in-house developed Max IOPS storage technology allows faster than SSD speeds, delivering up to 100K IOPS read and write. Sign up using the link in the description below to receive a $25 credit. All right, so most people know that follow the channel that I'm kind of a purist. I like to use the actual vanilla distribution and then build everything on top of that. But I realize that's not for most people. Most people want kind of everything there out of the gate, or at least most of the way there. I think every single Linux distribution you need to customize to fit your needs. But let's talk about the ones that are pretty much all the way there for most people. So there's really a couple distributions that I did in this poll. So right here, spoiler, Manjaro won it all with about 60 or so people in chat, and there's probably about a third of those voting in this poll, but it gave me a good baseline.
As a Manjaro user, no, Manjaro is not a good starting fucking point. Just recently, as an example, I had to stick to certain drivers. An update to FFmpeg borked NVENC, broke it. I couldn't go to newer drivers because of the video card. I couldn't use the 418 drivers because of the version that NVIDIA supplied. No, Manjaro is not the best out of the box experience. Oddly enough, I'm actually using if you're gonna go Arch, I'm actually using Endeavor, and it gives me the newest drivers, no fuss, no muss, and it just works. And oh hey, look, I'm doing this video on it now. So I call a little bit of BS on Manjaro being the best out of the box experience. Personally, I'm gonna say the best out of the box experience tends to be Pop OS, and I'm not a GNOME guy. I don't care. The bases don't matter to me. Unlike Homeboy here, when I say the base of an OS doesn't matter to me, I actually mean it.
And say, hey, here's kind of where the gauge is, and I totally agree with this poll. I think Manjaro is the absolute best, but why is that? Let's go over where Pop OS would be the best for maybe you. So for me, Manjaro I think would win every time out of the gate from a starting point, and Pop OS would win depending on your config. And really, where Pop OS shines is support for NVIDIA drivers. Now, most people realize like Ubuntu are like, hey, it bundles it in, doesn't it? And I'm like, yeah, it bundles the drivers in, but it's not active by default. Where Pop OS, if you download the NVIDIA ISO of Pop OS, those drivers are ready, they're rolling, they're running, everything out of the gate. Also, System 76, who basically makes Pop OS, does some other customizations, which is fantastic. So, covering Pop OS first, I would say if you're an NVIDIA card user, it is absolutely my number one go to, because NVIDIA drivers can be a pain in Linux. Just because if you're on like Arch or a rolling distro, it can cause some issues. It can be a bit of a headache to install these. That's why I never recommend NVIDIA for any Linux user. I always say get an AMD graphics card. But I realize some people have plopped down $600 for their graphics card and it's NVIDIA.
And it's blanket statements like that make you question your tech cred. You can be a server admin or sysadmin all you want. Hardware, apparently you don't pay attention. Get an AMD. Do you realize how blanketly stupid that is? 6 months to a year after the initial stuff comes out, yeah, get an AMD. If you want bleeding edge, don't get AMD. Always need the newest kernels, always need the newest mesas. It's the same headaches, just in a different way. And this is the thing that drives me up a wall about AMD fanboys, is that they refuse to acknowledge that just as many headaches as there are with NVIDIA, there's also headaches with AMD on Linux. It's just what it is. AMD's how did that Radeon 7 work out of the box day one? How did the Vega 64 work out of the box day one? How did the Ryzen chips work out of the box day one? They didn't. That's the point. So ignorance in that statement is totally apparent.
And if this is you, well, Pop OS is going to be your best starting spot. And it's very well optimized for gaming. I've installed Pop OS, I've gamed on it, and it's a pleasurable experience out of the box. The only thing I'd probably knock Pop OS over is I hate like the default theme. I don't like the desktop environment of GNOME. So in my whole playlist where I say Windows to Linux and it's a first time user, I actually use Pop OS in there, but I change the desktop environment, do a lot of customizations to Pop OS to make it more Windows user friendly. And I think this is really cool, especially if you're an NVIDIA user. You can follow this guide. However, instead of installing like KDE, you probably would want to stay on GNOME, as some people have reported switching the desktop environment to KDE causes problems. But I'll leave a link in the actual title card here. You can click on it and then go to that video or that playlist that goes over the entire first time installation for NVIDIA card users coming to Pop OS. Now, as far as, let's say you don't.
Short version, Pop OS is the default bearer right now for out of the box experience. Now, the problem I have with people like him is that they don't seem to understand what out of the box experience means. That means get your head out of your own ass and how you want things done and set up, and you just got your guide. You're like a Sherpa. You just guide the people to the top of the mountain. You don't actually physically bring them to the fucking mountain. That's the best analogy. I could say other things, but that's Pop OS is the best default out of the box experience right now. AMD or NVIDIA for a Debian or Ubuntu based distro, they are the quickest to add new support for new hardware, unlike its grandfather or daddy distros. Just saying.
Don't have an NVIDIA card and you just want to game and have the absolute best performance out of the gate. For you, this is going to be an Arch-based distribution. So for this, Manjaro has the best starting point. It has all the customizations. It has a ton of packages already installed by default, and it looks very, very good. You can also choose your desktop environment. They have all these different types of spins of Manjaro to where you could use a window manager like me. You could start with KDE for more of that Windows-esque look.
So, one thing, I would never use a Linux distro like you because I actually want to know what the hell I'm talking about. Two, Manjaro, I like Manjaro, don't get me wrong. The thing you're highlighting is not official spins. Mate, XFCE, and KDE are their only official spins. You're highlighting the community spins, which they might get support, they might not. It depends. They're available, yes, but really, it's a XFCE Plasma. No, my bad. I'll correct myself. But the point still remains that you really do not recommend like you talk about not. Oh God, he hurts my head. That's all I'm gonna say.
Look, or Cinnamon for a Windows-esque look as well, as that's another really good desktop environment. Or you can go with GNOME, like most Linux users where they're starting at, because that's what Ubuntu runs at and some others. But overall, Manjaro just gives you so many options, and it's very powerful. It's more powerful than Pop, Ubuntu, Debian, all these other distros out of the gate because it's running on Arch and it's a little bit more bleeding edge. So you get a lot of the packages faster, which is great, but also it can lead to some bugs.
Yes, you do get packages faster in comparison to a static release. There's still a holdback on Manjaro, which you tend to never ever fucking mention. Packages are held back. They're not always the most bleeding edge, you stupid shithead. And you can talk about stability. It's a myth. It's any update can break any system. See prior statement about FFmpeg obliterating my ability to use NVENC. Yeah.
So I made a video specifically going over, hey, making Arch stable, and really it's more of what not to do, because it's usually the user breaking Arch by doing some of those things. So if you want to go the Manjaro route, definitely watch that video, as it'll kind of just showcase what you should never do in
like update FFmpeg and have stable 418 NVIDIA drivers for the Quadro card that I run on, so I can have NVENC. Yeah, works great. By the way, it took Endeavor OS to actually, closer to Arch to actually fix. Because I did Solus, I did Ubuntu, I did Pop, I did Manjaro, I did Chaos too. None of them worked. I said, screw it, try Endeavor. Guess what? It worked. Here's the thing. What he doesn't understand, your mileage may vary depending on your distro, depending on this, depending on that. And this is something that I've always had an issue with this guy with. He doesn't take that into consideration. Generalizations are the death knell for technologists and people who are tech enthusiasts, because the only generalization you can make is that the problem is between the keyboard and the chair in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter if it's remotely the person working on it for IT or the person sitting directly in front of the physical machine. The problem is somewhere along the lines between the keyboard and the chair, or actual hardware failure.
An Arch-based system, which is what Manjaro is. But really, these are the two great ones. Now, in this poll, there was a couple other ones covered, and I wanted to touch on those real fast because I kind of made a broad poll and just to kind of showcase what each distribution has. And I wanted to make each distribution very different from the other. So in the Debian branch, I think Pop! OS is kind of a no-brainer, a great starting point for everyone. In the Red Hat or Rail-based branch, I chose Fedora because this is like the desktop distribution in this branch, and it does a really good job. However, this is more for business users, I think, because of its starting point, because Red Hat's more geared towards enterprise users and those types of things. But you can game on Fedora. I've done it personally. The packages are very good. It is almost like a rolling distro, but very stable. I absolutely love where Fedora is. However, would I recommend someone gaming on it? And the answer is no, not with these other options, just because I think it's a little bit tedious getting out of the gate, adding the proper repositories to download stuff. But it's not to say it's bad at gaming, because it is. I've optimized it, and it does turn into a pretty good gaming distro.
The stammering is starring. Like, if you want to go blow Fedora some more, go ahead. I know you're a Rel fanboy. That's your fucking prerogative. But get off the jock riding for a minute and actually see that what you're saying is any distribution can be made to game. You dumb idiot. Any distribution, 1804, 1604, take your pick. They can all be used to game. And again, the thing with Linux, your mileage may vary. Something that a lot of people don't want to ever say, but it's the truth.
Distro after some tweaks. But I would only recommend this to like maybe an aspiring Linux admin or someone that's mainly going to be using it for business, but they want to play the occasional game or two. So this isn't what I'd recommend for like a hardcore gamer. But at the same time, if you just want to play a couple games and you want to stay on that distribution, Fedora is a great option. Now, next on the list is something I've never covered on this channel, and that's Solus. And Solus isn't based on any other distribution. They roll their own kernel and everything. So they didn't just copy paste other stuff and other people's work and then just start changing things. They literally, it's a whole distribution on its own, and it is even geared a little bit towards gaming because it has like Steam installed by default and all those things, which is really, really awesome. And side note, like Manjaro also has Steam installed by default, so you don't have to install a lot of those packages. And Solus is much the same way. Now, it does use like everything. You have to be on their website. It doesn't have much support, therefore I don't recommend it for new users, as you basically, if it's not on the Solus forums or Wikipedia, there's not very many people that use this distribution in comparison to Manjaro or Pop! OS, as it has a huge user base, where Solus is not so big. But it's not to say it's a bad distro by any means. It is really unique and something that I'm keeping an eye on, and I'll probably do a video someday about it. But I like to just kind of touch on the actual use of Linux and not so much focus on the distribution aspect, as I think there's so many common things over Linux in all the distributions that you can pretty much talk about all the different pieces, and that way it doesn't matter what distribution you're on. A lot of my content's relevant to you, because it doesn't matter if you're on Arch or a Debian based system. All these just kind of apply, which is cool. So that's why I don't really dive too much into like distribution reviews and those types of things that many other channels do. I like to focus more on the positives of Linux and just the pieces of Linux, so it pretty much applies to everyone. Now last, it didn't get any votes, but I wanted to put it on the list, is MX Linux. And MX Linux is the closest thing to a user-friendly vanilla Debian experience, which means it's not like a fork of a fork, which is what like Pop! OS is. It's Ubuntu's based on Debian, and then Pop! OS is based on Ubuntu.
Okay. If you're going to use terminology, can you please at least get it right? The only thing that it remotely I would feel like doing with a fork right now is jabbing it in my eyeballs so I don't have to see this video, and sticking it in my goddamn ears so I can pop my eardrums. A fork is totally different. It's a derivative. Get your terminology right, because there's a big difference.
So that's what I call a fork of a fork, where MX Linux is pretty close to vanilla Debian. It just has a really nice interface and install options to where it gives you a decent starting place. I haven't covered it on this channel either, but it is a very good one. As most people know, that I love vanilla Debian because of its stability, and it is just amazing for those that just want to use their computer to work. Vanilla Debian's great, but I never recommend vanilla Debian for a gamer just because there's so much to configure and tweak to get it to a point where you're like, okay, cool, I can game on it now. It's a really bad starting point for many gamers that don't know a whole lot about Linux, as there's a ton of system options and things you need to change really to tweak it to make it very viable for mass gaming. So that's why I didn't put like Debian and other things on here. I also didn't put Ubuntu on here, as most people don't know. I don't really care for Ubuntu, as I don't like a lot of the packages that come with the OS. And also, from a gaming perspective, if you're wanting like an Ubuntu based distribution, I think that Pop! OS does a far better job, especially with a lot of the system tweaks that they do to make it just a better starting point than Ubuntu. So that's my logic for leaving out some of these really big distributions that you probably see everywhere of the best distribution to use. Well, when it comes to gaming, it's a different story altogether, and really that's where I kind of pigeonhole everybody into these two options, where if you're an NVIDIA user, use Pop! OS, and if you're an AMD user, hey, try out Manjaro. Or if you want more of a stable experience, or you don't want to care about being on the bleeding edge or having the latest and greatest packages, you can use Pop! OS as well. It's still a very good gaming system for AMD users. I just wanted to kind of put both of these out here because they're just fantastic options.
I'm stopping this video before my eyeballs start to bleed and my eardrums start to rupture my fucking brain from the dumb. Short version: any distro can be made into a gaming distro. The difference, and the thing that this particular person seems to be missing, is that it's the amount of tweaking that's going to go in the experience of gaming that you want. If you want stability, there's going to be compromise. Just like in Windows, there's compromise. Might be hardware, might be software. Linux just has potential software limitations, but that's based upon the user's choice to limit that software. The recommendation for Manjaro is concerning. I like Manjaro, don't get me wrong. I did my content production for over a year and a half on a Manjaro system. But not a distro I would recommend to people that are floating into Linux. Add remove software is a great utility. A lot of great hardware detection, but when the hardware detection don't want to work, it's not going to work. So what do I recommend? I'm gonna generically just a blanket, like if you want a distro to use for gaming, Pop! OS, type in Steam, type in Lutris, there you go, type in Wine. Jason Evangelo just did a video on it. And it's really, really simple. And as far as out of the box experience with support, Pop! OS is the best option. But to say these are the only options or these are the best starting points is blanket statement wrong. You can't pigeonhole people. You can't pigeonhole into one or two things. There's a lot of niche stuff that the focus is different, but you can make any Linux distro whatever the hell you want. And that's the point. Homeboy here, homeboy. That's the point you're missing. Then again, you miss a lot of points. As far as Solus, take the perks of Arch and add limited repos. It makes it a little more stable, and there's automated testing. So I'm going to get off this video before my ulcer kicks in. So you guys know what to do. Any gala, Patreon. Catch you guys in the flip. Peace.